Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. In the early hours of May 15th, 2018, the small town of Maplewood lay shrouded in a blanket of fog, its streets illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, and while, as the clock struck 3, a piercing scream shattered the stillness, echoing through the quiet residential blocks. It came from the modest 2-story home at 22 Pinecrest Avenue, a house that had seen its share of laughter and love. But on that fateful night, it would become a haunting whisper and conversation. Inside the house, 27-year-old Rebecca Mills, a schoolteacher known for her warm smile and endless dedication to her students, lay lifeless on the living room floor, her body sprawled awkwardly, surrounded by scattered books and the half-empty cup of cold coffee on the coffee table. A single dim lamp cast eerie shadows across the room, dressed in the remnants of a life that had abruptly ended. When police arrived on the scene, they were met with a convoluted tapestry of violence and confusion. Blood spattered the walls and pooled on the wooden floor, stark against the otherwise serene decor of the home. Yet, there were no signs of forced entry. The front door remained locked, and Rebecca's phone sat untouched next to her, devoid of any signs of struggle. Inside, the chatter of neighbors began to stir, drawn to the flashing lights outside. Unwittingly stepping into a nightmare that would engulf their commute, detectives soon found themselves intertwined in a web of secrets deeper than anyone could have anticipated, an investigation that would tear at the very fabric of what the town believed to be true. The victim. Rebecca Mills was a beloved fixture in the Maplewood community, a town where everyone knew one another's names. A first-grade teacher at Maplewood Elementary, she greeted her students each morning with a smile that could dissolve even the toughest of childhood woes. Friends and family described her as compassionate, quirky, and fiercely protective of those she loved. She had a talent for making even the most troubled children feel valued, bringing laughter and color into their often dim world. Her life, however, was not as perfect as it seemed from the outside. Beneath her radiant exterior lay a woman wrestling with her own demons. Friends recalled late-night conversations where Rebecca confided in them about her struggles, from the pressures of teaching to a troubled romantic relationship. They had noticed the subtle shifts in her demeanor over the past few months, often distracted. Her laughter came less frequently, overshadowed by anxiety. On the evening of her death, Rebecca had been hosting a small gathering. Her closest friends had come over to celebrate her birthday. The air filled with laughter, the smell of homemade lasagna mingling with the sweetness of birthday cake. The last photo taken that night, a snapshot of a cheerful group with Rebecca in the center, would later serve as a bitter reminder of fleeting joy. As detectives sifted through her belongings, they discovered a trove of journals filled with her thoughts of hope, fear, and the occasional unfulfilled desire for something more than her current life. It was in these pages that Rebecca articulated feelings of being trapped, burdened by expectations both her own and those imposed by her family and society. In her last entry, written just days before her tragic end, she expressed a yearning for freedom, unaware that her quest to find it would culminate in a fate she could never fathom. The crime scene. The crime scene unfolded like a tragic tableau, each element painting a grim story that would haunt investigator Laura Bennett for years to come. The moment she crossed the threshold of 22 Pinecrest Avenue, A chill swept over her, a stark contrast to the warm Sunday morning, already taking shape outside. She carefully navigated the threshold, taking meticulous note of every detail, from the scattering of items across the floor to the persistent scent of coffee and burnt toast that lingered in the air. Rebecca's lifeless body lay formless beneath the waning light. The way she was sprawled across the floor suggested a struggle, but the lack of defensive wounds on her hands painted a different picture. One that hinted at betrayal and deceit. Investigator Bennett knelt beside her and examined the bloody crimson droplets stark against the beige carpet, forming a grotesque pattern that told an unspoken story of pain and desperation. Photographs clicked in rapid succession as the crime scene unit documented the evidence. In one corner of the living room, a shattered vase lay among fragments of pristine flowers, its ceramic body breaking at the seams alongside Rebecca's life. The couch remained undisturbed, an oddity that raised questions. Wouldn't she have taken refuge there in her final moments? Or was she caught completely off guard? As investigators processed the scene, subtle hints began to emerge. The absence of a struggle appeared dissonant against the violent scene before them. Rebecca's phone glowed beneath the dim light. It held information that could be vital, but it remained untouched. A nearby window, though slightly ajar, showed no signs of disturbance, no frame marks, or misplaced dust. This was not a random crime. This was personal. With tension rising, Laura felt the weight of lives entangled in tragedy pressed down on her, each moment becoming eerily concrete. Each piece of evidence was a name, a secret, a connection to a woman whose potential had been snuffed out. The investigation would unveil more than just a murderer. It would unearth the fabric of a community intertwined with secrets and buried pain, a darkness lurking beneath the facade of a tranquil town. The early investigation. In the days following Rebecca's death, Maplewood grappled with shock and grief. What was once a quiet town filled with playful children and affectionate neighbors turned into a cauldron of suspicion and unrest. As investigator Laura Bennett delved deeper into the evidence, she began establishing a timeline of Rebecca's last days, piecing together the fragments of her life like a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. Interviews with friends and family unfolded slowly, each recounting their interactions and conversations with Rebecca. A common thread emerged: her relationship with her boyfriend, Tom Cott, described as charming yet unpredictable. He was deemed both a confidant and a source of anxiety. Rebecca's friends recalled overhearing heated arguments and whispered discussions of jealousy. While Tom was not present at the birthday party, he had been a constant fixture in Rebecca's life, a duality that painted him as both lover and potential foe. Laura next turned her attention towards the school where Rebecca taught. In hushed tones, colleagues expressed admiration for her commitment, but hinted at her mounting stress. As she spoke with fellow teachers, stories emerged about Rebecca's long hours, her attempts to reach at-risk students, and her struggle to balance her own life. Amidst it all, one teacher mentioned witnessing Rebecca's late-night phone calls, laced with tension, but her smile always returned the next day, cloaking her distress. As Laura sifted through Rebecca's social media accounts, she noticed a peculiar trend: the sudden disappearance of friends from her online circle, their accounts either deactivated or clean of any mentions related to Rebecca. This slipped under the radar of law enforcement initially, but ignited a spark of curiosity within Laura. In the digital age, social profiles held tales of relationships, betrayals, and hidden fears. The early days of the investigation were a blend of interviews, evidence gathering, and frantic research. Laura and her team were aware that every detail mattered, even the mundane. She knew the next step would be vital, not just to find Rebecca's killer, but to unveil the intricate web of emotions that had ultimately led to that fateful night. Each encounter peeled back layers of Rebecca Mills, revealing that there was much more to her life and death than the town had cared to uncover. The dead ends. Weeks turned into a blur of interviews and cold leads. With each passing day, the investigation into Rebecca's murder seemed to drift further into a labyrinth of frustration. Detective Laura Bennett meticulously pursued every angle, but the insights were frustratingly elusive. Each friend spoken to, every lead followed each brought with it a fresh wave of uncertainty that clouded the case. Tom Carr, the boyfriend at the center of the storm, had an alibi that, while not watertight, held under scrutiny. He was seen at a bar on the night of the murder, surrounded by friends of fact, corroborated by 3 separate witnesses. Yet, the silence from those who knew him struck Laura as significant. It was as if someone out there was bracing for something even darker lurking beneath the surface. But the thread she saw was nowhere to grasp. As she explored online exchanges and digital histories, Laura realized many of Rebecca's acquaintances had swiftly removed themselves from social media platforms, leaving hints of their past relationships utterly erased. Without a trail to follow, it seemed the investigation was being deliberately obstructed by fear or potentially something more sinister. The initial excitement faded, giving way to despair as Laura faced the truth despite the chaos of loss. People often chose silence over confession. Then came the unsolicited tip that turned her thoughts upside down. An anonymous call claimed that Rebecca had been involved in a questionable online relationship, one that might have spiraled beyond her control. Laura pursued this lead, but it led nowhere tangible. One dead end slowly twisted into another, and time slipped by like sand through her fingers. As she sat alone in her tiny office late one evening, Laura leaned back in her chair, staring at the wall covered in photographs. Each image a painful reminder of the case. The faces of those who had loved Rebecca were etched in sorrow, their grief becoming palatable through the inconspicuous environment of the police precinct. Yet each person represented a puzzle piece they had yet to find. The unease settled around her like a thick fog, but the detective remained determined to sift through the shadows, for she believed that somewhere in the darkness lay the light of truth waiting to be revealed. A break in the case. The investigation was pivoting towards desperation when a tip came through that unexpectedly reignited Laura's hope. It arrived on a Tuesday morning just as the sun broke through the overcast skies that had cloaked Maplewood for weeks. A witness, a barista at a local cafe, reported having seen a man loitering outside Rebecca's home on the night she was murdered. The description was vague but distinct enough to capture Laura's attention. Tall, with dark hair and a distinctive tattoo on his forearm. Fueled by renewed determination, Laura wasted no time in following the lead. She called the barista in for an interview, eager to learn more about the man who had caught her attention. In the cramped interview room, sunlight streamed through the one-way glass, illuminating the barista's nervous fidget. He recounted that while he was closing the cafe late that evening, he had noticed the man watching the house, his demeanor uneasy, an anxious energy radiating from it. Laura's heart raced as she took notes, asking detailed questions about the man's features, what he was wearing, and whether he interacted with anyone nearby. While the witness couldn't definitively identify the stranger, He claimed the man had been mumbling to himself and frequently checking his phone. His behavior stood out enough that the barista had actually thought of calling the police that night, but after a moment of hesitation, he had opted against it, not wanting to stir trouble for someone who might simply be a harmless passerby. As the barista left, Laura turned to her partner, Detective James Reynolds, who was studying the notes. "We need to canvass that area, see if anyone else remembers the guy," she said with resolve. "This could be our way." Laura coordinated with officers to fan out over nearby neighborhoods, distributing flyers and gathering descriptions from residents who might have spotted similar characters on the night of the murder. Hours later, a younger couple came forward with a chilling detail. They, too, had seen a tall man with dark hair lingering outside Rebecca's house, just minutes before the scream had pierced the night. Fueled by a mixture of adrenaline and anticipation, Laura finally felt that the oppressive weight of the case might be lifting. Somewhere within the chaos of heartbreak and lost lives, a name was beginning to materialize. And with it, the opportunity to unearth the truth behind Rebecca Mills' tragic end. A suspect. After a whirlwind of interviews and newfound evidence, Laura's focus sharpened onto a name: Daniel Mercer. A ragged-looking 30-something with a troubled past, Daniel had recently been released from prison after serving time for burglary and had no steady employment. An officer's familiar voice from the records room recounted their interactions with him, the kind of lowlife who seemed to disappear into the shadows more often than not. Armed with this information, Laura and James conducted a background check on Daniel, unearthing a tangled history of mental health struggles and unstable relationships. His pattern indicated a penchant for violence when provoked, but no prior history of murder. However, Daniel had reportedly been seen in Rebecca's neighborhood on several occasions, often drifting near the school where she worked. That connection tugged at Laura's instincts, igniting a flame of suspicion that couldn't be ignored. Laura decided it was time for a direct confrontation. They arranged a stakeout near a rundown apartment complex where he was known to frequent. As they waited, the air thrummed with tension, a palpable mixture of anticipation and unease. Hours passed, punctuated only by the occasional rustle outside. Just as the sun began to sink low in the sky, a tall figure with dark, unkempt hair and the faint outline of a tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve. They followed him at a distance, observing as he stumbled through the familiar neighborhood, seemingly unaware of his observers. When he turned into an alleyway that cupped whispers of chaos and desperation, Laura and James decided to intercept. As they approached, Laura noted how Daniel shifted his weight, an anxious tic that betrayed an underlying unease. "Danny Mercer?" she called, her voice firm yet measured. He froze, turning with wide eyes that reflected both surprise and fear. "We need to talk." The ensuing conversation escalated quickly. Daniel was uncooperative and evasive, his body language betraying the facade he attempted to maintain. And as they pressed him about his whereabouts on the night of Rebecca's murder, Daniel's inability to maintain eye contact only heightened Laura's suspicions. His stammering responses ran in stark contrast to the calm demeanor he initially tried to project. But when Laura brought up the barista's sighting, Daniel's composure cracked, if only for a moment. Sweat trickled down his brow, and his hands trembled slightly. He began, trilling off before he caught himself. It was an inadvertent slip, but it was enough to convince Laura that they were closing in on something significant. With growing certainty, She reached for her notepad, ready to jot down critical details that might unravel the tangled web of Rebecca's last moment. The investigation was evolving, threading together danger and distress into a familiar pattern. And with this new suspect not yet a definitive answer, she sensed they were inching closer to the truth hidden in the shadows of Maplewood. The trial. The daylight slowly crept through the courthouse windows, casting a muted glow over the proceedings. Inside the packed courtroom, a hush fell upon the crowd as they awaited the moment that would bring justice for Rebecca Mills. The air was thick with tension, every spectator acutely aware that they were about to witness the culmination of a harrowing investigation that had gripped the small town for years. Daniel Mercer, now a figure of bitter discussion rather than sympathy, sat at the defendant's table. His once proud demeanor had dissolved into a frail shell. An air of desperation surrounding him as he awaited his fate. The unfolding events were relayed by the prosecution, revealing a devastating portrait of Rebecca's last moments through forensic evidence, testimonies, and witness statements. With a detailed reconstruction of the crime, the state endeavored to firmly place Daniel at the scene. Laura Bennett took the stand, her voice steady yet filled with conviction. She recounted the sleepless nights spent combing through the details, meticulously piecing together not only Rebecca's tragedy, but the life that once shone brightly before it was extinguished. She described the pain of notifying Rebecca's family, her resolve to find the truth alluring and suffocating all at once. The memory of Rebecca's vibrant laughter haunted Laura as she faced the jury, aware that they too were immersed in a tale that transcended mere facts. As the prosecution's evidence unfolded, Daniel's defense team fought fiercely, painting a picture of a man who had struggled with his demons but remained innocent of murder. They highlighted his past, distressed childhood, and mental health issues, arguing that he had been a scapegoat targeted due to his troubled history. The jury listened intently, wrestling with the complexities of the case, veering dangerously close to sympathy for Daniel rather than justice for Rebecca. Days stretched into weeks, and testimonies waxed and waned amidst expert analysis, dissecting the mental state of a man struggling for redemption. The courtroom became a battleground of emotions, whispers of doubt creeping into the minds of observers. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. The jury filed into the courtroom, the weight of their decision palpable. As they took their seats, both sides held their breath, anticipation crackling in the air. The foreman stood, his voice echoing with gravity, announcing the verdict. We find the defendant, Daniel Mercer, guilty of second-degree murder. A wave of relief mixed with sorrow washed over the room, tears glistening in the eyes of Rebecca's family as they embraced one another. Laura felt the glassy surface of her own emotions fractured. Justice had been served. But at what cost? While the specter of Rebecca's loss would linger within Maplewood, hopes now flickered of healing within the community. As Daniel was led away, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his fascia, the remorse, anger, or yet another layer to the persona he had built amidst shadow. Laura knew she had done the necessary work, but some questions would remain forever unanswered. In the aftermath of tragedy, with the truth finally dawning, the town would bear its scars together, bound by an unyielding search for light amongst the lingering darkness. The aftermath. The verdict reverberated throughout Maplewood, a town straddling the line between relief and grief, as the echoes of Rebecca's name resonated through the streets. Life began to slowly resume its rhythm, Yet the shadow of her loss hung heavy in the air, like a faint fog refusing to dissipate. The vibrancy that once filled the town became a cautious flicker. Memories of Rebecca lingered at every corner, in every home where she had taught and loved. Laura Bennett found herself haunted during her late-night drives home, the haunting local news pieces replaying in her mind. Justice for Rebecca Mills, they proclaimed. Yet she questioned the true implications of the outcome. The truth had emerged at a cost, one that continued to unravel within the layers of grief in Maplewood. In the heart of the community, a candlelight vigil was organized, drawing friends and family together to mourn the loss of Rebecca. Enveloped by the warmth of shared memories and fondness for the life she had led, the glow of candles flickered against the night, illuminating the faces of those who came to remember the parents of her students, her colleagues, a community bound together by sorrow and love. As Laura stood among them, the moment felt surreal. She could see Rebecca's former students, now briefly unified in the shadow of loss, their innocent faces both confused and resolute, clinging to the memory of their beloved teacher. Each flickering flame represented a story, a life touched by a woman whose passion had unknowingly ignited life in others. In the distance, the faint strains of music echoed, a gentle reminder of Rebecca's love for art and creativity. Details that had adorned the walls of the school she once graced. Yet amidst the remembrance, underlying tensions, Daniel's conviction stirred debates within the town about the complexities of justice and morality. A small group of citizens organized demonstrations, voicing opinions that his troubled past and alleged mental health struggles warranted a deeper understanding. They argued that he should not be painted solely as a monster, but as a victim of circumstance, an unsettling sentiment that split the community's heart. While struggles emerged, Laura found solace in the resilience of the community. Neighbors began engaging in more open discussions about mental health, violence, and the importance of rapport among families. In the subsequent weeks, support groups emerged, seeking to provide a safe space for those grappling with personal trauma, anxiety, and loss. Laura watched as the community, once divided by pain, slowly began knitting back together. Each conversation, every gathering, whispered to the world that they would not let Rebecca's death be in vain. They would honor her legacy by supporting one another. Days turned into months, and while the pain of Rebecca's absence never completely faded, the light of hope began to flicker brighter. As the seasons changed, Laura felt an inextricable bond form between her and Maplewood, reflecting their collective will to nurture healing, acceptance, and remembrance. In those moments, Laura understood that while justice had been served, the journey toward unity and understanding would be the ultimate triumph against the darkness that once engulfed their town. Reflection. As winter melted into spring, Maplewood began to reclaim its identity. The heart of the community, pulsing with a resilient spirit. Yet for Laura Bennett, the passage of time carried with it the remnants of emotions that refused to fade. The case of Rebecca Mills lingered, inscribed deeply in her memory, like tattooed ink on skin. Each street corner, each familiar face brought forth flashes of sadness, mixed with determination, a poignant blend that would forever shape her understanding of justice and humanity. In quiet moments of reflection, Laura grappled with how easily life could shift. The comforts of familiarity had been shattered, exposing the fragility of joy and the interconnectedness of their stories. While the trial had concluded, The underlying questions remained tethered in her mind. Why did Rebecca's life come to an end? What forces had ultimately intertwined in that fatal moment? She often visited the memorial site dedicated to Rebecca, a small garden adorned with colorful flowers and hand-painted stones. One afternoon, as she knelt to adjust a wilting bloom, she encountered the gaze of a child with big, curious eyes. The little girl, one of Rebecca's former students, held a crayon drawing of her beloved teacher, the sun brightly framed behind her, smiling. The pure innocence of childhood blended with something deeper, poignant in its simplicity.